I am so excited to bring all of you our next edition of the table for the month of February. It is the last day of February, and I am thrilled to continue to honor and bring forward amazing guests for Black History Month. And before we get started, and before I introduce our guests for today, I do want to thank our sponsor, Daily Pay. They are up there in the corner. They're phenomenal partners. And as I share with you guys every week, if you haven't looked into this product and you have more than 500 employees in the US market, I highly encourage you to check out Daily Pay. And if you'd like more information, you can reach out to me. I'm happy to talk to you about my experience as an end user. I implemented their program. This product allows your employees to access any earned but unpaid wages at any time through an app. And this can be game changing for folks. You may not be aware, but the average American spends $1,200 a year on overdraft fees. And Daily Pay has data showing that among their users, they are saving about $1,200 a year in overdraft fees. So it's really, really a powerful product. And I'm so grateful that they have partnered with me as a sponsor for the show. And with that, I am thrilled to invite my guest for today. Today we are meeting Kim Sullivan, who is the CHRO of Concentrix. So they have hundreds of thousands of employees across the globe. And I was excited to invite Kim to join me because the work they are doing in the D&I space, and as a Black woman who has earned her seat at the table as a C-suite member, I knew each and every one of you would be interested to hear her story, learn about what they're doing. And with that, I am bringing Miss Kim to the table. So thank you so much for being here.
Hi, thank you. I appreciate the invitation. I'm flattered.
Well, I was when your assistant responded and said that you were interested in doing the show, I was like, yes. I was so, it's exciting for me to interview folks who have done the jobs I've done or are doing the jobs that I'm doing and who are powerful, strong leaders who are not afraid to take up their space and use their voices and lean into the work that needs to be done. And I see you doing all of those things. So I knew when I was getting ready to put my lineup together for Black History Month, you were definitely one of the people at the top of my list to bring onto the show because our audience loves hearing from successful folks who maybe have attained that C-suite seat or have attained a specific role that maybe somebody in the audience is interested in. And to be able to hear about your journey and hear about your experiences can help them potentially, get where they want to be as well. So thrilled to have you here. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Well, that's why I'm here, because I've engaged and I saw people who looked like me and who helped me, that have helped me. So I'm happy to pay it forward in any way. So I appreciate the invitation.
Well, thanks for that. So let's start there. So I would love to hear a bit about your story and how did you know you wanted to get into human resources, and at what point did you realize like, wow, this is really working for me, and I'm going to set my sights on that C-suite level, because you've been a CHRO now a few times, and this role is a really big role. But you had some other ones before that prepping you for this. So talk about your journey and your career and how you got where you are. So somebody watching might just be starting their career and this might really help them.
So my story is really one. I have to. When I was in college, I worked part-time for a retail company, and I would help our regional recruiter. I would help that person with administrative tasks related to recruiting, career fairs. That's back in the day. That's when we did job fairs and went on campus and all that good stuff. We held happy hour sessions, all sorts of things.
All those.
But at the same time I was in college, I had a teacher who was at the time, I think she may have been, I don't know, she was very involved in the American Society for Training and Development. And I know they've since changed their name, but she was very involved, and she would always invite the students to class, to her workshops and conferences, etc. And my minor was organizational psychology. So through that minor, that's how I got to meet her. And I participated in one of the conferences. Long story short, that's where I got the introduction to kind of formally what HR is. We'd always heard about HR, but it was more around hiring and firing.
Right.
And that,
Yep.
and which sometimes people still say, you hire people and fire people. Not quite.
Yep.
But I was introduced, participated, and then at the same time, I got lucky. I was offered a full-time position. To the recruiter left, and I was offered a full-time position as a recruiter, and that opened the opportunity. That was my first professional HR job, and then from there I was been very fortunate to have worked for some great brands, work on many projects, under the leadership of many leaders, some good, some I've learned great lessons from. And and it was probably 10 years, I'd say less than 10 years in, I thought I want to keep doing this. And where that happened, I moved from a field HR leader role to a corporate organizational development role. And that shifted my entire perspective from just being kind of, focused on field related work, employee relations, investigations, training, to training delivery, to being on corporate projects, global projects, being exposed to global integration work. And that's what I thought, oh, the breadth of this work is much broader. The impact of what I can deliver is much broader. Oh, I can work with senior executives and help think through the people impact or their business strategy, or help partner to build out their business strategy. And it was through that work that I was stretched, but also really confirmed for me. It validated that I was in the right job. I was in the right seat as an HR professional, or a business professional with HR expertise, to quote David Ulrich.
That's what I say. So the tagline for my company is, I help create business leaders who work in the people space.
That's right.
So
That's right.
Absolutely aligned with that. And so
Right.
that makes me so excited to hear
Yes.
other people, because it's so important. It's so
It
important.
is.
And so did you have a mentor or multiple people who kind of helped you along the way? Because I'm certainly not going to make an assumption about age, but I'd say you're a little over 25. And
I am.
Just a smidge, just a shade. And so when we think about the workplace, when, back in that time frame when you were just getting your feet wet and figuring things out, it looked very different, I think, than it looks today.
Absolutely.
And how did you maneuver, and how did you get the I guess the ideas or the support needed to continue building on your career? Because you're amazing, and obviously you delivered, and you did the hard work. But most of us know that you can work really, really hard, you can be amazing, but if you don't have those advocates or those mentors or that support system, sometimes it doesn't, you still may not go anywhere because you don't have the exposure you need, or that person to open that door for you. How did you navigate through that?
I was thinking, someone asked me recently, I'm mentoring a young lady who is in high school preparing to go to college, and she asked me about mentors. I've been asked that question over the years, but I've always referred to people that have helped me later in life as as I've moved into executive roles. But I actually really sat and thought, I've had a lot of people that have been just a blessing to me. Number one, I always give a shout out to my mother, because she believes that her children can literally do anything, could and can do anything. So if I were to say, Mother, I've decided, forget HR, I'm going to be a brain surgeon, she would be like, you can do it, Kim. Let me know how I can help. So she's always supportive in that way. And she's been supportive with children and family and all sorts of things, traveling. But I've had throughout my career, even in my first job, the person who promoted me into, a regional recruiter position, and then HR generalist, and then HR manager, that person, that my boss, encouraged me to get my HR certification way back when. I didn't really even know what that was, but she really valued the or the certification through I forgot the organization that sponsors it, but she valued that, and that's why I got my certification. And as I've continued to move into roles,
Yeah.
I've had leaders, even when they were very challenging, who gave me a platform and projects and work that enabled me to really learn and grow. But I've had several. There are certainly, as I've become more senior in my career, I have a few people who called out, Kim, you should be a CHRO. And I thought, no, I think I'm good. I'm like, no, I'll just raise my kids. And that's how I thought. But then, more conversation took place. You can do it. You can balance or integrate your personal life with being a great leader, because you really focus on being a good leader, or I try to focus on being a good leader. And those individuals have encouraged me to continue reaching and stretching myself self and reaching for new goals. And so I have a team of people. A squad is one of my members of my team. She refers to her squad. I have a
Yep.
squad of people who help me every day.
Yes.
When I have, sometimes it's, for business decisions or to think through, to be thought partners. And sometimes it's to allow me to vent and to just kind of whine,
Yeah.
until I'm in a better place to go out and fight the fight again.
Well, sometimes that's what you need, right? And
Oh,
one of the
yes.
things I share often with folks who are interested in moving up that ladder, up that chain, is to recognize that the higher up you go, especially in the HR and people space, it becomes more and more and more isolating. And it's important to understand a lot of the things that we deal with are highly confidential or highly
Absolutely.
personal. So we are exposed to information that you can't go and talk to your peer, maybe the COO or the CMO or another executive leader, because it's about someone's personal health, or they're going through a divorce, or their child is sick, or they lost a loved one. We can't talk about those things. We also have really high stakes when our teams make a mistake. It's not
Absolutely.
something that is easily, covered up or put under the rug, right? Everybody in the company knows about it because our work touches everybody in the company. And not that other people, hide mistakes. I'm not insinuating that. But it is a very different game when if you push one wrong button in payroll, the entire company could miss a payroll, right? Like the stakes are very high in the work we do,
Yeah.
which creates a lot of confidentiality and a lot of heightened anxiety. And a lot of folks don't realize that. They think, oh, well, the higher up you go, the quote unquote easier it gets because you get
The more problems you have, the higher up you go. That's
the reality is the more problems you have, right? But to have that squad is so important. I wonder
absolutely.
if she uses that term. So I'm a big follower of Dr. Brene Brown. And Brene talks
Yeah.
about having your square squad. And the premise to that is if you take a piece of paper and you fold it down to a 1-inch square, the number of names that you can fit on that 1 by 1, square piece of paper is really the people who you trust enough, who have your
Mm.
back, who you love and who love you and will be honest with you, tell you when you're out of your integrity, tell you when you're on the right track, bolster you up, but also anchor you to the ground. And that's your square squad. So I wonder if that's where your team member got that phrase from, because
That may be. I'll have to ask her. I do follow Brene Brown. I've not heard her mention that, but I'm going to listen for that now. I'll
yes,
ask her about that. Yeah.
it's
And
in
she's
her
right.
Daredevil book. But it's true. When I facilitate folks going through like the Dare to Lead training, I'm not a certified Dare to Lead facilitator. Just putting that out there in case somebody wants to come at me for that. No, I am not. Although I have been through with a facilitator the Dare to Lead training, and I have facilitated parts of it with organizations. And the Square Squad is one of the elements we go through because it makes you really think about who can you trust, who trusts you, and who will always be there for you, which is critical in your role. Absolutely
Absolutely.
critical. So
Absolutely.
I think that it's great advice for folks who are looking to maybe move into that space is have your squad in place, whether they're your employees or your friends or your family, but you need that balance of insight and people helping you to see things that you may not be seeing, not because you don't want to see them, but you can't be in all places at all times, right?
And I don't think people realize, you know, listen, it is a wonderful experience to go through your career. At least my experience has been wonderful. The good and the bad have led me to who I am today and what I'm doing today, the way I lead, the way I engage, the way I parent, all those good things. And I
Mm-hmm.
am nothing but thankful and blessed for all of all of the opportunities I have. But I also don't know that everyone always understands that your role with that, there are a lot of seen and unseen pressures that come with it. There also, it can be lonely to your point, because if you're the CHRO, who do you go to when you have to chat? Same
Right.
thing for CEOs, right? Yeah, at the end of the day, everyone is dependent on that role, that individual, to make decisions, as you are in any senior, if you're in the most senior position. So you have to have people around you who keep you grounded. Whether
Yeah.
that's, sometimes those are members of your team, and sometimes those are members of your family, whomever, but you definitely have to have that square squad. That's important.
It is. Kids are
Yeah.
really good at that too, right? Just
Oh God, yes. They could care less about our titles, and yes.
you got it all together. A kid can bring you right back down to reality, right? So that is
Exactly.
so true. As you kind of maneuvered your career, I know what my experience was like, and how different role I could see, potential patterns and different ways to get to a certain space or a certain level. But I would love to chat with you about, you have an additional dimension that is part of your lived experience, right? You are a Black woman in this world. I don't know about your ancestry, if you consider yourself African American or Black, or maybe you're from
I
an
do.
island. I don't know.
Yeah.
But visually, right, you fall into
Yep.
that category. And how has that helped or hindered, or like how is that informed, I guess, maybe your experience, and have you felt anything that you want to pass on to maybe the next generation that maybe could help them?
I think number one, as a woman, and certainly a woman of color, and I consider myself African American or Black.
Okay.
But I think, number one, as women, we work hard. We are caregivers. We will take on, a massive workload, right? And we keep going. And so that resilience that I saw from my mother, my grandmother, my aunts, the women around me, having jobs, running businesses, but still working and taking care of their families. And they were much better at housekeeping than I was back in the day, because I don't like cooking. I will clean, but I'll clean over cooking. But at the end of the day, they were present and available for their families. And so, and I think I bring that same passion, commitment, and work ethic to what I do every day. I strive for excellence. I always tell people I am not a perfectionist, not even close, but I do strive for excellence, because I want to make an impact on my team. I want to do sustainable work. I want to take care of my family. I want my children to be good people, balanced people. And so all of those things make an impact. I also work with the expectation that, while I do work hard, there's also sometimes a double standard and an expectation to be even better. And so that drive, as a Black woman, right, that's where the Black woman piece comes into place, that there's little room for error. And so I have to work really, really hard at delivering results and building a relationship. And as I've learned, some of the lessons that I've learned over the years are around the importance of relationship building, the important, and not just being focused on working hard. Working hard alone will not get you where you need to be, but the importance of investing in relationships, because sometimes we hear so much about being excellent and driving results and working hard, to where we can miss some of those social cues around building relationships and being organizationally savvy. So those are lessons that I've had to learn throughout my career. And but most importantly, where I'm at in my career, and also in my life, is being authentic. I'm not good at being inauthentic. So I am, I still drive for excellence. I still strive for excellence. I'm sorry. I still want to achieve. I still have that competitive spirit, but I also approach everything in a very authentic way. And I think that's important for me also as a Black woman or as a woman, because when women see me and they sit, and we talked about representation mattering, representation matters for other people. They can see that you can be a mother, you can be a sister, you can be tired some days, you can be excellent, but you can still deliver and be at the top of your game at the same time. So those are some of the things that I think about on a pretty regular basis, Barbie.
I love that. We were talking before we went live today a little bit about, some of the things that bring us together. There's obvious differences between us, but we were talking about hair, right? So like you said,
Yes.
sometimes you're tired, sometimes you just don't get it all done. Well, I didn't have enough time to blow out my hair straight today. So you got the curly version of it and we were laughing, but it's one of the things that I hear Black women say a lot is that, professional hair is not your natural hair. And so you've been conditioned, not you personally, but in general, we've been conditioned to make assumptions about what is and isn't professional in the workplace, especially for Black women. Like you said, you have to work twice as hard. You have to do things twice as well. And, the whole hair thing, we were laughing, but I have experienced it, and I'm not Black, right? I'm as far from Black as you could get. And I don't say that in any negative way, but I say that because people say, well, I don't have any right to be in this space because I am a white woman. And I get that. And I have a lot of respect for people with that perspective. But I will say that even as a white woman, there are things that make me different that give me a perspective on D&I as well. I'm overweight. I'm over 40. I'm gay. My hair. I didn't even know that this was a thing when I experienced it 20 some odd years ago, when I was told, and I shared with you, I had a man at work come up to me and say, can you just do something with that? Like smooth it out. Right? And you laughed because you knew exactly what I was talking about.
I know.
It's exact. So I do get that. And it has happened to me on more than one occasion. So I've almost had to recondition myself to recognize that my natural curly hair isn't bad.
Yeah.
I've been embarrassed of it. I've not wanted to wear it like this for a long time because I was told it wasn't professional and I didn't see other people who looked like me with hair that looked like this at an executive level. So very rarely, literally whenever I run out of time, do I wear it like this, or if I'm at the beach, because I don't have a choice at that point. But I do understand what that felt like to me in that moment. Now, did that type of microaggression happen to me every day? No, it didn't. But it did happen to me on occasion. So I'd love to hear, like, aside from the hair thing that we have all at this point, I think, recognized is a real thing. Have you experienced other microaggressions at work that you would say, if I wasn't a Black woman, I probably wouldn't have just gone through that? And what did that make you feel like? And the reason I'm asking is not to bring up pain for you. I'm asking so that anybody watching can learn from this and be aware that what you may not recognize as an aggression or as something inappropriate can be very hurtful to the other person, and like, stop doing it. Like,
Yeah.
Stop the crap.
No, I will tell you, going back to the hair topic, it is not an uncommon topic that people of color, Black people in particular, have had. There are lots of conversations and preferences that have been made, known to people of color or Black people about not wearing your hair natural or natural hairstyles. I really have never focused on that personally because I change my hair all the time. Sometimes it's straight, sometimes it's natural, and it's natural now because of COVID-19. I just was like, I don't feel like doing all that hair. And I have a friend who is white who she was frustrated. We were having a conversation about why she hasn't been able to advance in her career. And it's funny, during that discussion, this was 2-3 years ago, she said, I know I need to straighten my hair because her hair is naturally curly and she has a lot of it. I know natural she said, curly hair is not acceptable. That is not seen as professional. It's not seen as great. And I said, who's been telling you this foolishness? That's not true. You can wear your hair however you want to. So I do know that while that's a real conversation in the Black community, it's an issue oftentimes for women around how we should be, how we, people have this perception about how we should present ourselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
But going back to your question, so microaggressions, absolutely. I have definitely experienced you are aloof, you are, start with a smile. I remember being told, smile more, don't be so serious. And at the time, I didn't get it. I was like, I was totally baffled. Like, who are they talking about? Like, when does this happen? When, like, at what time in the meeting? Right? And I would literally be like, at what time during the meeting do I switch to being so serious and intense and, and just being like overly aloof and all of those things, or being told that I'm exclusive and, you're very direct. And guess what? I may be some of those things sometimes. I probably have been at times exclusive, but aren't we all kind of exclusive? Exclusive in the way that, not meaning I didn't want people of different experiences, but I didn't hang out, when it was time to go drinking during trips when we all traveled. No, I didn't go hang out at 11 o'clock at night. And so I was told, you're exclusive because you don't come out and get drunk with us. And I was like, no, because I need to go to bed. But nonetheless, I definitely have experienced those microaggressions, and sometimes you still experience them. But what I am better at now than I was when I was younger is calling them out in a professional way. And I'll say, so, and I don't always do it in the moment because I don't want it to be an emotional response. I don't want it to be even uncomfortable in the moment for that person, although it probably is still uncomfortable when I come back to the conversation. But I'll say, I want to bring you back to a conversation we had a couple of weeks ago. I don't let it go too long. And here's what was said to me. Here's how I took that. And I bring the conversation up for a couple of reasons. One, I need the person to understand how I received that and how I didn't appreciate it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that I didn't appreciate it, and you said something that was totally off or, misjudgment. Secondly, it's education for them we have around the fact that we have to choose our words wisely. I choose my words wisely when I engage with you. You should do the same with me because you don't know where I'm coming from. You're not aware of my experiences. And if you're curious about something, say, hey, Kim, I'm curious about something.
Yeah.
I want to make sure, I was thinking about this. Am I off? Is that right? Here's what I think. There's nothing wrong with asking, Barbie, about someone's intention, someone's behavior, someone's background, as long as you do it in a professional way, as long as you approach it in a way that says, in a way that makes them feel safe, right?
Mm-hmm.
Versus assuming and making an accusation, which feels like an accusation to the other person. So I do address microaggressions, and I try to do it in a very healthy way, I hope.
I think that's fantastic. One, I applaud you for having the courage to address it. But I love your approach because sometimes addressing it in the moment is absolutely what you have to do. If
Absolutely.
it's egregious and the person
Absolutely.
you've tried to address it in other ways and they're just not getting it, sometimes you do have to do that. And I get that. But I like that you're thoughtful enough about your approach, because I think by giving it some time, hopefully your emotions, you've worked through your emotions, right? So, and they're likely not going to feel as defensive because they know you've given this some thought, you've waited, and you're bringing it back to them, just like you said, in a safe space to say, I don't know that this was your intention, but this is how it felt. And you're doing it from a purely educational perspective of, I hope you take this in the right way, but I don't want anybody else to feel this way. And I think that's you're doing it with such grace and dignity that if they don't hear it, 100 million % at that point, it is on them.
That's right. It's on them. That's right. Because I gave you the space to let's talk through it, right?
Yeah.
And it's just like going back to the hair conversation. I have a girlfriend who is white, And I said to her, I said, hey, tell me why is it? What is it that white people what is it about our hair? Why do white people have so many questions about our hair? And she said, Kim, you can, and she used her, she said, let me give you an example because you can do so many things. My hair is really fine and it's really thin. You come in, you can put it up, it's curly, it's straight, you know. She said, you can put it in a bun. I can't do anything like that. So I'm curious. And that was a learning moment for me. And I thought, oh, okay, it's just curiosity, right? And does that mean everyone that comments on Black women's hair are curious? I don't know, but I had a better understanding about why we're asked so much about our hair. But also my friend who has commented on my hair and meant nothing, had nothing but good intent. And I was never offended by anything that she ever said, but I was curious. I have been curious, like, why the obsession? Because I think around the same time, one of my daughter's teachers had recently touched her hair because she had braids. Her hair was in cornrows. And I think that's what prompted me to say, tell me, what is it? You know, what's going
Mm-hmm.
on? And so I think through that dialogue, all of that to say, through better dialogue, and sometimes it is uncomfortable, no doubt, right? It's tough to bring up a conversation with a peer, a colleague, or boss when you have felt uncomfortable. And sometimes, to your point, you got to call it out right then and there. But what I've tried to do, I often try to do is bring it back as a conversation about learning, but also awareness that I didn't like the way you brought that up. I didn't like, this is how I felt, because then you're teaching people how to engage with other people if they have comments or curiosities about different topics.
Absolutely. I love that because I think I choose to believe, and I could be wrong, but I choose to believe the majority is genuine curiosity for learning and understanding. And there's
Absolutely.
always going to be a percentage of the population that is nasty and they do it to hurt others and to wield power or to try to, have power over. But I think, at least for me in my life, and most people have just sincere questions, inappropriate at times, but it is from a place of genuine curiosity. I can take it to a whole nother level where I will have people ask me how our children came to be, because my wife and I have two children, and there's lots of things, right? So people involved here. It didn't happen. We didn't wake up pregnant like a lot of straight married couples do. But at the same time, asking me that the first time, saying, so how does all that work between, like, who had the kids and who's the father and all of that, like, that's deeply personal, private information
It,
that
it amazes me how comfortable people are sometimes asking questions.
yes. And sometimes I'll just look at people and be like, yeah, no, we're not going to talk about that right now.
Right.
And again, it's not shame. I'm not embarrassed, but, like, I don't know you well enough to know that this is a safe conversation for me yet. So let's give it a
Absolutely.
minute before we go down those paths. So I can
Right.
relate in that regard to some of the inappropriate lines of questioning that can happen in and out of the workplace, for sure. In that, I want to also touch on, you talked about having to work twice as hard, and I've seen that as a woman, for sure. I've shared this example before, but having been at Amazon for years, they have a practice called Gemba, which is part of Lean and Six Sigma. And Gemba, the word is Japanese and it means go see. And the Gemba practice is that the leadership teams walk around the facility to go where the work happens, to see what's working, what's not working, talk to the employees, what's working, what's not working. And it's a great way to make sure you are in touch with the reality and often the root cause, because you and I both know that when something breaks out here and then it gets filtered through 5 or 10 people before it gets to you, the reality is often very different than the story or the information we're given. So the Gemba practice is really great because it puts you in the space and in this scenario where the work is happening. So I kept trying to introduce this to an organization. And the CEO would make fun of me all the time and be like, "Oh, Gumby, here goes Barbie wanting to do her Gumby again." Right? Because he didn't understand what Gumby was. He would not even open his mind enough to consider the concept or the idea. And I spelled it out over and over again. We hire a white, late middle-aged COO who I loved, think he's great to this day, think he's great. His second week or so, he's at the executive meeting with me, and he says, I think we should start doing, he called them boardwalks, where the leadership team walks out, and I'm looking at him and I'm like,
you're like, wait a minute, hold up.
The CEO was like, that's the greatest thing ever. I wanted to lose my mind. I literally wanted to lose my mind. So I've seen from my experience that we have to work twice as hard, have better ideas, use an interpretive dance to explain things to get people to understand us. I wonder, when you said you have to work twice as hard, how has that manifested in your life, in your experience?
I think number one, being scrutinized, right? For number one, feeling like there is zero room for error or little room for error, right? Or I cannot make a mistake. Therefore, but I have peers who don't put half as much effort into their work, yet I am held to this very, very high and sometimes unrealistic standard of behavior, leadership, results, etc., right? Performance. Secondly, it is anything I say that, you may not agree with, then gets scrutinized with this, this massive magnifying glass to say, what did you mean? What are you trying to say? And even sometimes the implication that if I say something, there's some litigious behavior behind it, right? Or a thought behind it. I've seen that before, and I'm like, I'm like, I don't have time for that. I have 4 kids. I don't have. I'm just trying to do my job, right? I think, and it shows up in so many different ways. Ideas, being present at the proverbial table and presenting ideas, using the example that you gave. I think ensuring that there is my feedback is taken and not being dismissed, because very often as Black women, our input is dismissed for whatever reason. There was a report published by Korn Ferry that talked about Black professionals in America, or no, not I think it was Korn Ferry, but they did a women's report, 2021 report on women. And in that report, they talked about the challenges that Black women in particular go through, how for example, our ideas or our suggestions are often dismissed. And one reason for that is because there's still not enough of us, women representation, and certainly Black women at the table contributing. So if you're thinking about a business strategy or working on a project and you don't have that representation there, and that's why representation matters. And it's not just Black women, but it's, if you have to have representation to reflect your community. If you're building something, buying something, thinking about a strategy, and you don't have representation there to contribute, you're going to miss a total perspective. You're going to miss a part of and you're not going to build out what needs to really be in place to support your customer needs.
Yeah.
And I think for Black women, we are often dismissed for whatever reasons. And so I think that is really important. And what happens is that often makes us want to work that much harder, because we want to make sure we have our input or our say. And that drives feelings of exclusion and being dismissed. And so there's so many things that we can talk about in terms of how that shows up for us as Black women, and women in particular. I feel like I'm representing all the time for the Black race. I am representing for both women and people of color.
Yeah. And that's kind of weigh heavy on you too. Like you said, you're working twice as hard because you're wearing 3 hats, right? You're an executive, right? Or even 4, you're an executive. You're in the HR and people space. You're a woman, you're a Black woman, you've got all these things. So every time you're making a decision, you're running it through all of these different lenses, right? All of these different things, where I don't know, and I don't know, truly I don't, because I've never been a white man. So I don't know, but I wonder, how many lenses does that white man think about when he's making a decision? right? Is he thinking about, oh, am I representing this? And am I that? Like, I don't believe that that happens. I think
No.
some do, but in general, I'm not really sure. I could be wrong and I'll probably be roasted for saying that. But I'm just wondering how often that white men are stopping to pause. And I'm not picking on them at all, but just saying like their lived experience is so different that they're just unconsciously not making that happen. And how is it going to impact this and this and this and this and this? This isn't part of their lived reality. So they have a very different lens. Lord knows I'm probably going to get like crucified for saying that. But
Well, I think if something is not, if it doesn't impact you, right? If you're not impacted, if you haven't had to live your life as the minority, not in terms of, I'm not, and take out the thought about race. If you've not had to live your life as being, under marginalized or marginalized, I'm sorry, my grammar's so bad today, marginalized, or just not being part of the minority group, then you don't think about that. You don't have to, right? You don't have to think in those terms, because those are not things. And again, to your point, it doesn't mean that there are not some folks who think about, who are very thoughtful about how all of those decisions show up, or how their behavior shows up, or let me represent for this group and that group. There probably are people, no doubt, who do that. But if you are not impacted, negatively, generally speaking, then you don't. Why would you think about that?
why would
You
you?
don't have to.
Yeah.
You don't have to.
It's so true. You have to go out of your way and be purposeful. If you're not
Absolutely.
part of a minority group, to immerse yourself enough to understand their lived experience and reality. I worked with a gentleman, he's an SVP of operations, and he's wonderful. And he has one or two biological kids, and then he has one or two adopted kids. And at least one of his adopted kids is a young Black child. I want to say he's probably 7 or 8 now. And the person I worked with is white. And I absolutely loved having conversations with him, because he would talk about how much he's learning by parenting white kids and Black kids, and the absolute difference in the messages that they bring home, the questions that the children are asking, the questions about their worthiness, and why did this person say this to you, but they said this to me. And like his view is so different now than it was before. And he's taken extraordinary steps to make sure his Black children and his white children are living their truth and their reality. So he's made efforts to make sure his Black son goes to a barbershop where there's other Black men, and he can get in touch with that part of his culture, because that's not necessarily the same culture that his white kids would identify with. But so I give him so much credit for caring and being aware enough that those variances exist. Neither one is better than the other, but they exist and they are different. So to make sure that his kids have the opportunity to get in touch with those cultural anchors are really important to him, because he wants them to be proud of where they came from. And I think that's so important. And when I was interviewing a few weeks ago, Ernest Krim, who was the victim of a hate crime, he wrote a book, How Black History Saved His Life. And he talked about how important it is to know where you come from, because it informs everything about who you are and where you're going.
Absolutely.
And I love that. And I hadn't really thought about it until he said it that way. And now as I'm thinking about other people, I'm like, oh, it makes so much sense why they're doing that now, or why
Absolutely.
it's important for those kids to have those lessons in their lives.
Well, think about wealth. I know we're out of time, but think about wealth, right? So if you live paycheck to paycheck, or, and it's a small paycheck, what it's like. You, going back to lenses, you are thinking about every penny, every dollar of that paycheck. And so you are thoughtful and intentional about how much food you buy, how much gas you buy, how much you probably don't fill up your gas tank. You get enough to get to A and B. You probably get enough food to get your kids fed, or the minimum, right? Versus someone who doesn't have to think about that. So it's the same thing it's the same concept. The same concept can be applied to race. If you don't have to think, if you don't have barriers and you don't have to think about those things, you just go through life applying for jobs, working, engaging,
Yeah.
making friends, and that's not a bad thing, right? That's not a bad thing. We would love to remove those barriers for everyone so we could all just be going through life, happy. And the same applies to that a person that has a big enough paycheck or brings home enough money or has enough in their account to not have to think about, oh, I can only get $5 worth of gas. I can only get, $10 worth of gas. I can only spend $40 on food. That's a totally different way of thinking and operating and living. And when you remove those barriers for people, then you can thrive. So it's just a totally different mindset.
I love that example, and it's going to segue us into the last bit of our conversation because I do want to be sensitive to time. Daily Pay is our sponsor, and I'm a huge fan of their product. And one of the things I love about their product is that from a D&I perspective, it really helps level the playing field financially. Imagine if you have an employee who gets a flat tire on their way to work, and maybe they've had some attendance issues because they're a single parent and their kid has been sick in the past, so they don't have any additional PTO to take. That flat tire can cause a snowball effect that can be financially devastating for that person. They don't have the money to fix the tire, which means they're not going to get to work, which means they're probably going to get written up because they don't have any PTO to take. Or maybe they were written up before because they didn't give notice because they had a sick kid and they didn't have a support system. Or they're going to write a bad check to pay for that tire. And that's going to, there's so many things. So by being able to access their earned money without paying interest or penalties and get that tire fixed instant in the moment and get to work avoids all of these potential negative outcomes. Mm-hmm. Or like you said, when you're choosing your groceries and you only have $40 to spend, but then your kid gets sick and they need medication. So are you making a choice between medicine and,
That's right.
and food, or electricity and medicine, all of these things? So when you look at your role and the organization, as large as your organization is, from a D&I perspective, how are you, or how has your team been able to kind of weave in D&I so robustly? Because it's clear when you look at the Concentrix website, when you look at your population, you seem to have really happy people working for your organization, and D&I has been at the forefront of a lot of that. And I want to say that that's probably a result of your influence. So how have you been able to do that and make it actually integrate into the organization?
We do have a lot of very happy and engaged employees at Concentrix, so I'm glad that resonates and comes across. There are a few different things. We have a DE&I strategy. We have some very targeted goals and metrics that we measure. So measurement. We are also, our strategy around DE&I is to embed and operationalize the work in everything that we do. So we hold leaders accountable. We mandate that leaders are trained on inclusive leadership, what it means to lead inclusively, what it means to really be attentive to an employee's well-being and their mental health and resilience and burnout, because all of those things connect. And when you do that as a leader, when you demonstrate those behaviors and you care, you demonstrate that you care, one of the outcomes of that is inclusion and belonging. We also focus on representation. So we're very focused right now on representation, leadership representation by country, because we didn't want to just take a US-centric approach. We're a US-based company, but we want to make sure that we're growing leadership representation across the organization. Also, equity reviews. So we're looking at our policies to determine if it's equitable. We've looked at our pay to determine if we have equity issues across the organization, up and down and across the organization. So it's really, at the end of the day, it's about how do we operationalize our work to ensure that we are driving the right outcomes, and how do we measure it?
I couldn't love what you've said more. That I use the word operationalize often. And a lot of the work I do now in the consulting space is helping organizations define their core values and their leadership competencies, but then operationalize them so that they are meaningful and they help drive the culture and drive the outcomes you want. And so I think that's so incredibly important. And I love the other thing that you said that I've yet to have one person say this, but that you're reviewing your policies, right? Because we know that it's the infrastructure and the system that cause the inequity.
That's right.
And infrastructures are built to protect certain things. And so we have to look at what those things are. And are we protecting the right things? Or are we protecting things because that's just the way it's always been done? And what we should be protecting are our people. And our people are vastly different, right? So I love that. And that's one of the reasons I wanted you here today, was because I wanted people to hear how intentional every element of what you're doing is. And it might seem easy, and it might seem like, oh, you had a magic wand and you're like, boom, here we are. And now
no.
It's not that easy. It doesn't matter who you are. It's not that easy.
It's hard work, but it takes being deliberate. And I know we've used that word quite a bit, but you have to be diligent and you have to resource it. And that doesn't mean a team of 100 people, but you have to be committed to putting some resources in place to get the work done.
And it doesn't mean you have a bunch of ERGs where you have your minority people leading your ERGs for free.
Right. Exactly.
You invest in a lot of different ways. And ERGs can be great. They can be fantastic, but they're not your only element.
No.
If you have a true D&I strategy and your only thing is that you have ERGs, that is not a D&I strategy.
Right? Which is interesting. I've met so many people that have talked about how ERGs are their strategy, and that's interesting. And I get maybe people are trying to work with what they have, but that's not going to won't drive the outcomes that you need.
No, because no. And that's a whole conversation in and of itself. But yes,
it is.
It's so intentional with all of it that you can see the results of that. And it's so obvious. So I'm hoping that some of our listeners and our audience will be able to take some of those nuggets and work it into their organizations as well. So Kim, we are at time. You've given me, we've gone over your time frame. So I apologize for that. I thank you so much. This was a wonderful conversation. We could talk for hours. I hope you'll consider coming back.
Of course.
I love having strong, amazing women on my show, especially leaders like you who have such an amazing career, so much to share. So really, really grateful. And thank you everyone for watching. This one is not live, but we will be sharing it on our YouTube channel. And I'm just thrilled for all of you to be able to hear Kim and all of our guests. And again, thank you to our sponsor, Daily Pay. They're amazing. And there'll be some slides after this to show you how you can connect with them or reach out to me. I'm happy to talk to you about it. So thanks everybody. Excellent. Have a great rest of your afternoon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.